Hello, everyone. My name is Nikki Saddiq, and I am so excited to be a part of the Faith and Mental Health Merger Summit today. Really excited to be here. Like I said, my name is Nikki Saddiq. A little bit about me: I'm a mother of three. I am a life and business coach. I'm an author. I'm a trauma recovery and self-love advocate, and I really love talking about trauma and healing. If I'm talking about Jesus, I'm either talking about Jesus or I'm talking about trauma recovery and self-love. These are the two main topics that I love talking about. So this is a great opportunity to really merge them together today. I have been saved for about 10 years, going on 11 years, and that has been the most beautiful experience that I've ever been on, being on a journey with God. But today we're going to be talking about trauma and the 5 stages of healing. And I'm going to really blend in my story a little bit with the teaching. So we'll start off with the first stage of healing. I'll tell you all 5 of the stages and then we'll move through them. So the first stage of healing is denial and being unaware. The second stage of healing is awareness, being aware of your trauma. The third stage of healing is grieving, right? Grieving the trauma, processing the trauma, and then releasing the trauma. The fourth stage of fourth stage of healing trauma is acceptance, really beautiful stage. And the last stage is the stage of action, right? So I'm going to go ahead and jump a little bit into each of these and share my story with you all. So denial is a big part of healing trauma, right? It's the place that we have to come out of before any healing can begin to take place. It was a place that I lived in for 24 years. And I lived in denial for 24 years because I had complex PTSD for 24 years and I didn't even know it. Of those 24 years, 14 of those years were through childhood. I didn't really have any signs or symptoms that I could see. But then for about 10 of those 24 years, I experienced on 4 different occasions falling into a PTSD crisis that landed me into a mental hospital those 4 different times. And after those experiences, I would pray about it. It was very strange to me and left me with a lot of questions, but I was still really much in denial that I didn't take any action. Didn't try to find answers, just kind of stayed in denial and prayed about it. And the Lord is our strength, but being in denial for that long really affected me. And if I had the capacity, or if I would have went on a journey to find out more about what was going on with me sooner, it would have been the better, right? So that was my story. Lived in denial for 24 years, then had those experiences for 10 years. And it wasn't until I became a mom that a similar situation took place. And I kind of said, okay, I got to kind of get some answers now, right? I have 3 children. I need to figure out more about what's going on with me. And that is what led me into the journey of discovery, of finding out that I was a complex trauma survivor, and understanding that me being molested at 9 years old affected me, affected my nervous system, affected so many parts of me. So that is my story. That is what brought me into the world of faith and mental health and merging these 2 things together. So denial was that very first stage that I was in. And that is the very first stage that you have to come out of to start to begin to heal. So we are in denial because we're not ready to face it. We're in denial because we're numbing ourselves. We're stuffing the emotions down. We have it locked away. We've tucked it away. We don't want to deal with it. It's too intense for us to deal with. And that is the stage that it all begins in, right? And the second stage of healing, which is coming into awareness, right, is a beautiful stage, right? When we come into the stage of awareness, out of denial, we are mindful, right? We're starting to make those connections of what I went through as a child is now affecting me as an adult, right? We start to make those connections. Trauma responses like codependency, perfectionism, drug addiction, self-destructive behaviors, having a lack of boundaries, depression. There are so many to name that these are the different stages. These are the different things that we find out in the stage of awareness, right? What has the trauma that has happened in the past, what has it done that I am now responding to it? Sometimes we have cognitive distortions, ways of thinking, really bad thinking patterns because of the trauma. A lot of times our whole identity is completely rooted in the trauma. That was the case for me. Our whole identity, our whole personality is rooted in trauma, right? Especially when we talk about complex trauma. But today we'll be talking about trauma. So that is the second stage, is the stage of awareness, the stage of discovery, where you're starting to identify, you're out of denial, and you're open to the idea of, my trauma has affected me in so many different ways. There may be eating disorders, and there may be so many different things that we can talk about. Mental health disorders that have come into place, complex PTSD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, whatever it may be, as a response to the trauma, right? So that is the second stage, a stage of awareness, a very difficult stage to come to, but a very beautiful stage of kind of gathering information, getting an understanding of trauma and how it has affected you, your life, and your body. And then we move into the third stage, which is the stage of grieving. Grieving, just like a stage of grieving a death, right? We have grieving the trauma. You are now going to not trauma respond unintentionally. You're going to intentionally now begin to respond to the trauma, right? Begin to process the trauma. This is a lot of what happens in cognitive behavioral therapy. When you go to therapy, you'll be processing that trauma. This is the stage where you grieve, where you actually come alive to the experience, right? You come alive to what happened to you. You come alive to whatever trauma that may be. That was the case for me. I came alive to the things that had traumatized me and caused me to pretty much disassociate from myself because of the intense experiences that I experienced as a child, that I wasn't ready to face and I wasn't capable of facing as a child. I had to open up myself to the world of that information, to the world of the details of my trauma, right? And as we heal trauma, the details are very, 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 very important, right? We want to gather that information fully and begin to process it and heal it and remove the trauma from our body. So that looks like crying, releasing, and having that season of really sitting with the trauma, sitting with our experiences, coming to a place of, this really happened to me, right? This is something that I went through, and really coming alive to that and feeling all the emotions. So that is that stage of healing, is grieving, right? And it can look different for everyone. And I also would say that in that grieving stage, we also can grieve through pouring ourselves into things that are allowing us to release the pain, right? Even something somatic, where we're moving our physical body, something like dance, right? Dance, whatever it may be that lights you up, painting, any type of therapeutic activities that you're doing, that could be done in the stage of grieving. So the next stage we have, which is a wonderful stage, right, where the sun comes out. And this is as we grieve, this is the next place that we want to get to, right? This is the journey. This is kind of like the destination, pretty much, that you want to get to as you grieve, is a place of acceptance, right? Acceptance, beginning to accept the trauma, right? Beginning to accept, this is what happened to me. Starting to forgive yourself, right? In this stage of acceptance, forgiving yourself for all the mistakes that you made while you were traumatized, forgiving the experience, accepting more than everything, accepting the experience, right? Accepting, this was a very intense situation for me to go through. This is very difficult for me to let go of, but I want to accept it so that I can move on and be free, right? Starting to accept the pain, starting to accept, maybe there was childhood neglect, accepting that childhood neglect. Maybe there was a rape or molestation or whatever it may be, that the trauma that you experienced, starting to accept that trauma, right? That's that beautiful stage of acceptance where the sun comes out and begins to shine, right? And after acceptance, we move on to action, right? Self-discovery. We start to build the things that we didn't have. We start to build boundaries if we didn't have boundaries. A lot of times trauma makes it difficult to have healthy boundaries, right? You may have lost your right of saying yes and no. That may have been taken from you, or you may have never been taught that you could say yes and no, that no was a complete sentence, that you had the capability of creating healthy boundaries for yourself. So in the stages of action, we're starting to recover from the trauma. We're starting to take action in our lives. We're starting to build boundaries, healthy boundaries in our life, right? We're starting to have self-confidence. A lot of times trauma is an attack on the self. It affects the self, right? So we're affected. Our self-confidence is affected. Our self-trust is affected. Our self-esteem is affected. And we are people-pleasing, right? When we talk about trauma and its responses, one of the responses is a fawn response. We have the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. The fawn response produces codependency. So if we're healing and we're in the stage of action, we're no longer being codependent and people-pleasing, but we're now standing in a place of self-trust, right? We trust ourselves. We're not looking for validation from other people. This stage is about building. It's about sharing your story. It's about getting the message out. It's about standing in your truth, right? And no longer being bound by trauma, shame, guilt, or pain, but now standing in the truth of love, right? The love of Christ, the love of Jesus, right? The word of God in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 17 says that if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation, that old things pass away. Behold, all things have become new. In this season of taking action, we stand in that truth of that old things do pass away. We're able to let the trauma, the pain, the hurt pass away, right? And in these different stages, it's going to look different for everyone. But I'm going to share a few things that is really important and key as we work through our trauma. Support. Right? Having a healthy support system is really important. If you can get into therapy, that is a good thing, right? If you could have a place where you can sit down and process your trauma, that's going to be a healthy thing. Boundaries with ourselves is really important as we heal, right? Eating well, sleeping well, exercising, taking care of ourselves, prioritizing our emotions. Having times out of the week where we sit with our emotions, right? We journal, having a support system or accountability partner that you can call, that you can express some of your emotions with and get some mental, emotional support, right? We also want to have ways that we can educate ourselves. A big part of healing is education, right? Understanding. Right now, being a part of this summit is a part of educating ourselves on faith and mental health. Starting to understand how mental health it ties into our spiritual health and how it's a very important thing for us to do. And that is taking care of our mental health. Really starting that self-love journey and having the support system that you need. There is a lot of stigma behind mental health. And there's a lot of people who don't seek help because of the stigma, because of the shame, because of the guilt, because of the denial. And we have to start to break that stigma by telling our stories. The word of God says that we overcome by the word, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. This is how we know it's really important for us to share our stories, right? For us to be transparent, for us to be vulnerable. This is how we combat shame, by being vulnerable, right? By opening up ourselves to a world of support, a world of feeling seen, a world of feeling of being heard, right? This is how we overcome. So these are the 5 stages of healing. I'm going to go over them one more time, and then I will close out. So the first stage is denial, right? Being in denial and being unaware of the trauma and how it has affected you. Maybe like me, going to law school, living your life, but then still underneath it all, having an inner battle, a war with yourself that isn't overcome, or experiencing different things that are maybe a little questionable, that it's a little bit more than prayer that is going to be needed to resolve those things. So that is the stage number 1. Stage number 2 is coming into awareness and mindfulness. That is opening up yourself to the reality of the trauma and the things that have affected you, right? And being willing to explore that, being willing to open up that closet and start to unpack some of the things that you've gone through. That is the stage of awareness, actually knowing, and then starting to realize, oh, I do this because of that. I do this maybe because of something that my mom did in the past. So that is that beautiful stage of awareness. And after awareness, we move into a place of grieving, right? Now that we are awake to it, sometimes it may be 20, 30, 50 years of pain that we have not really dealt with. And that is that stage of grieving where we're really going to let go. We're really going to release it. A lot of crying, a lot of dealing with the memories that you haven't dealt with in many years. This is a lot of trauma processing where you're going to do cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever the Lord leads you to do, right? Because it may look different for everyone. But in that stage of grieving, you want to release. You want to allow yourselves to feel your feelings, to feel how you feel, to deal with how you felt. And that is that stage of grieving. And then from grieving, we move on into the stage of acceptance, right? A stage of forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, and just accepting it, right? Where before we were in denial, it was too hard to accept. And that grieving helps us get to a place of acceptance where we can start to accept what we went through and begin to really let it go and no longer be responding to the trauma, but now standing from a healed and a whole place. That is that stage. And then action is the last stage. Action is where we cultivate all the things that we lost. We build the things that we'd never had. If we were codependent, we start to stand in self-confidence. We start to go on a self-love journey. We self-care. We take care of our bodies. We have healthy coping skills. We're no longer using drugs or alcohol or food or different things that are unhealthy to cope. We're now coping in healthy ways. We're journaling. We're taking care of our body through self-care, exercise. So these, and we're telling our story. These are the 5 stages of healing. I am so honored to be a part of this event today and so happy that you all joined in to listen in. And hopefully it's very beneficial for someone, right? No matter what it is, someone may hear it. And you may have experienced trauma and you may be in a stage of denial or you may be in a stage of awareness, but it does get better. It's a tough journey to take, but it's a really beautiful journey at the end of the day. So that is my story and that is my information today on trauma and the 5 stages of healing. If you want to find out more about me, my website is nikkimadenew.com. And if you want to contact me, feel free to reach out to me on my website. I'm on Instagram, and my Instagram name is Nikki Made New. You can find me there, and that's NIKKIMADENEW. But it's really awesome, and I'm so glad that you guys had a chance to be with me today. Have a wonderful day, everyone.